let yourself be aware of sitting or whatever position you may be in. Releasing any need to hold yourself up by virtue of being balanced. Or if you're not free sitting, then being supported. So, in an easy situation for the body, as easy as it can be, given whatever the conditions your body may be experiencing. And let your awareness spread a little wider. So you take in the space around you. You can just be aware of it, and your body is within that wider space. And it's relaxed. And we're going to be looking at a koan that really addresses, in some ways, the sort of, deepest purposes of practice, which when we touch them can somehow also feel like the deepest purposes of being alive as a human being. And some of you might know that it's well known, really. I'm sure you do know that the Dalai Lama, when asked about the purpose of life, I think commonly has said the purpose of life is happiness. And so this is a koan about happiness. Once again, they all are, actually. They all are about happiness. And we might say happiness that can be found on different levels, and koans tend to aim for pretty sort of deep levels, which is why we have other kinds of practice as well, because we don't want to be deferring well-being until we've had some, profound awakening experience. That would be absurd. There's many ways to be much happier prior to that or without that. Some of the wisest, kindest people that I know and have met in life had never had, so far as I know, an awakening. It wasn't really of interest to them. So we mustn't get caught in some mindset that it's the only way to reduce suffering. It may be a kind of, I don't know, very profound way to make it very different. But even then, it's probably qualified because we're humans. We're not sort of ideal beings or something. Or in another view, it's our imperfection and our being just as we are that is in some way perfect. It's not necessary to be some kind of ideal person. That's not really what we're after. So before I say anything more confusing, let me get to this koan. I want to I actually have to preface it by saying it's a pretty weird koan. It's very long and it's very strange, and it's probably about the strangest koan that we have, actually. But I'm afraid I'm not going to do the whole koan. I'm only going to look at the core of it, the absolute nub of it, which I think is what is most pertinent for us. And it is a question. And well, I think what I'll do is I'll read part of it to you, so you can hear just a little smidgen of the weirdness in it. And Actually, what the koan comes up in our in the 5 books of koans that we study in Sambo Zen. It comes up twice. One in the longer, even weirder version, and once in a shorter, still kind of weird version, but not as weird. So that's the one that I'm going to read right now. Okay, but so just remembering that we're looking at the Gateless Gate collection, number 2, case 2, koan 2, but I'm not giving you the whole thing. This is the version of it in another book. Okay, but it's a sort of same koan. And it's, you're going to hear anything, what on earth is that about? So anyway, let me just dive in. Whenever Hyakujo gave a talk in the hall, there was always an old man there who heard the Dharma and left when the others left. One day he did not leave. Hyakujo asked him, "Who are you standing before me?" The old man said, "In the long distant past, in the time of Kashyapa Buddha, I lived on this mountain. Once a monk asked me, 'Does a person who has completed the great training fall into cause and effect or not?'" So that expression, someone who has completed the great training, that's to say somebody who has essentially, profoundly awakened, thoroughly awakened. Do they fall into cause and effect or not? This is what we're going to be unpacking. In response, I said, they do not fall into cause and effect. Now, apparently that was the wrong answer, because as a result, he goes on to say, because of that answer, I was reborn 500 lives in the body of a fox. Because I gave that wrong answer, I was reborn. I was sort of condemned to be reborn as a fox for 500 lifetimes. Now I'm asking your reverence, the Hyakujo, to say a turning word for me. So a turning word is basically a word or a phrase that can help, perhaps, bring us from an incomplete view of things to awakening. It can open up a broader understanding, experience, awareness of this moment that is qualitatively different from our normal way of experiencing it. That's a turning word. Actually, often koans are called turning words. So he's saying, please help me to awaken by saying something that will help me. Okay. And so Hyakujo does. He says, the law of cause and effect cannot be obscured. Okay. And at these words, the old man attained great enlightenment. Okay. End of koan. Now, I don't know whether this is interesting or utterly boring or baffling in an intriguing way or baffling in a like, who the hell cares about this? Long ago, weird stuff. Now, so my job is to try to make you care about it and realize that it's important in some way to you, and it's talking about your life and your practice. I mean, basically, it's actually, if you think about it, it's quite a serious question. If we, let's say, somehow thoroughly awaken, are we then freed from cause and effect? Cause and effect, is precisely, you would think, being sort of bound into the world of suffering. where we are subject to the challenges, frustrations, disappointments, losses, adversities of whatever kinds that come up in this life, and affected by them. I mean, at the root, that sort of, isn't that what the question is really asking about? Are they still liable to suffering if they have thoroughly awakened? Are they liberated from that? Now, actually, I mean, it is quite an interesting question because, I mean, first of all, the Buddhist path is often named as the path out of suffering. You know, the Buddha said, he laid it out clearly. There's the Eightfold Path, and if you follow it, you can end the causes of suffering, or the primary cause of suffering, which is craving. Craving. What do we say? Wishing, tightening against the way things are, tightening toward how we want them to be, gripping, you know, grasping after, and a physical gripping in the body, in the chest, you know, that wants, contracts and wants and craves, you know. That's the primary cause of suffering, not letting things be as they are. Now, not to say this is a formula for utter passivity. No, it's not at all. It's actually, I mean, if you look at the Eightfold Path, which I can't go into now, it is about more actively living kindly and helpfully, and cultivating, developing our capacity for well-being, for self and others, you know. And that methodology having the potential to lead to a profound shift that we call awakening. And if we then look at, I mean, here's where it sort of, you know, kind of does get, the question gets more pertinent and interesting. If you look at awakening, I mean, in the old formula, of the Four Noble Truths, the awakening happens because when you follow the path to its conclusion, something happens called cessation. And cessation is what brings craving to an end. It's sometimes taken to be just cessation of craving, but actually, more commonly and more sort of deeply, cessation itself is an experience. What is it an experience of? It's an experience of the cessation of all experience without dying. And actually, I heard a very interesting interview recently with a guy called Stephen Snyder. Some of you may know of him. He's a teacher who spent, I think, approximately 20 years in sort of deep Zen training. I'm not quite sure, but I sort of think in our style, more or less, of Sambo Zen. I think, at least he was referencing the 3 pillars of Zen when he was talking about it. Then spent 20 years studying under a Burmese Theravada master called, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, actually. It's not a long name, but I just can't remember how it's pronounced. I can sort of see it in my mind. But anyway, a Burmese master who was, you know, a Sayadaw, which is, I think, an honorific, right? Maybe, yeah. No, I'm not even going to try to say his name because I'll get it wrong. Sorry. Anyway, this Stephen Snyder was talking about cessation and naming it as, you know, a critical possibility in practice, and stating very clearly what it is. It's an experience where everything ceases, as the name implies, cessation. everything ceases, namely, no more sensory experience, no more mental experience, no more consciousness. Now, that's a stunning thing to hear because um, you think, how can you have an experience without consciousness? And also, I mean, what about after? And um, and what a bizarre idea. But he's absolutely right. This is why this is why this question is so pertinent. Are you still under the law of cause and effect? Because in that experience of cessation, it becomes clear that the whole um, the whole manifestation of cause and effect, which we call the universe, you know, somehow um, in the experience of cessation, that's gone. And you're not dead, and you're not asleep, and you're not unconscious. And consciousness even has gone. So this is crazy. It defies logic. Now, how are we to take it? There are different ways we could take it. One would be, so somebody goes through some kind of weird experience that can happen through deep meditation training. And yeah, they seem to be helped by it. Great. And then become maybe more helpful people in the world. Let's hope. That's one possibility. So the only claim really there is that this is in some way, um, a profoundly helpful experience. A second level of claim could be that in that experience, you are actually seeing something, undergoing something, having something revealed to you, so to speak, about the nature of your experience, that it is a matter of appearances that rise with much less veridity. Is that the word I want? Veracity, veridity, sort of solid truthfulness than they appear to have. They have less than they appear to. And in that moment, you're really seeing through their apparent solidity. It's all, I mean, solidity is not quite the right word because this would include thoughts and, as I said, consciousness. Even those immaterial things, they're gone because, in fact, on some level, they really aren't as solidly present as we take them to be. So their second level of claim is a little bit higher. You're saying something about the nature of our experience, that we're still not going further than that. Let me just be clear that in this second level, we're saying experience, all the experience you have is some kind of stuff appearing before you. Okay. And you've seen through it. You've seen through to the fact that it is only appearances, and therefore you can sort of see through them. And of course, that has to include all that pertains to you. All of that gone. Okay. Now, the third level of sort of claims to be made on behalf of such an experience is that you're actually discovering something real and true, veridical, veracious, whatever, about the very nature of all existence. That in fact, all, not just sort of your experience of stuff, but the very nature of all things is to be not only appearing and not only merely appearing, but actually empty. This terrifying, terrible Buddhist word, emptiness, that actually at the bottom, sort of, well, it's not really the bottom, right on the surface, whatever, all the way through, all our experience and what our experience represents, what we call reality, is all in fact empty. So in other words, when somebody goes through this kind of experience, cessation, they are discovering that firsthand. They're discovering for themselves that the entirety of creation is actually sort of here and not here. Okay, that's the third level of claim to be made for that kind of experience. And honestly, it's very easy when you've been through it. It's very easy to sign on to any of those levels. It's rather hard not to. It's so convincing. But let's leave that question aside just for the moment. I do want to come back to it. It might have to be next week, but not next week. We got a retreat. Week after, we got somebody else in whatever, 3 or 4 weeks' time. Doesn't matter. But, okay, so regardless of that, coming back to this question, does an enlightened person fall under the law of cause and effect or not? If enlightenment is waking up to that, to the fact that all of this stuff arising, all of this appearance is actually not what it seems to be. Like waking up out of the dream. If we're in misery because of all the distressing things going on in life, understandably, very understandably, for many of us, difficult stuff happens, and it's very painful, and we learn through practice and through all kinds of growth to somehow have more capacity for the sorrows of this life. And of course, that somehow also opens up our pause to greater joy as well. And we become fuller, richer beings, let's hope. Now, fine, that's great growth, and that's devoutly to be wished for all of us, that we can, weather the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune more, what's that word? With more serenity. By the way, this book that I just took the koan from, the shorter version, is the Book of Serenity, the Book of Equanimity. Equanimity, able to roll like a bark on the sea, like a boat on the sea, a ship on the sea, not capsized, win some, lose some, And for some, actually, I've heard deep equanimity as what happens in awakening. We are so open, so surrendered to what may be hard for us, that we just drop all the way in and through, and it can blow right through us because we're not there, and we discover that we were never there. So look, it's a pertinent question, isn't it? If you're clearly awakened, do you fall under the law of all that causation? Have you seen through it? So you're not submerged by it, overwhelmed by it, troubled by it. Are you free of it all? I mean, in a way, that would seem to be the promise of Buddhist liberation, to be free of all suffering, to be free of all causation. So the old guy from time immemorial, when he's asked that question, he says, yeah, you're free. You don't fall under the law of cause and effect. And whatever, the universal law of karma kicks right in, law of cause and effect. And he has to have 500 lifetimes as a fox. I don't know why that would be such a sort of terrible punishment, actually. But anyway, it's considered sort of a step down. So you see, this is, I think, the only koan actually that speaks to reincarnation, as far as I can remember. Tripartite reincarnationism, technically, that common form of reincarnationist belief that was rife in the old world, in Eurasia, between, they think it really took its form somewhere in the early first millennium BCE and hung around till, I don't know, I suppose it's still hanging around in some parts. But it was known in Greece as well, by the way, in 6th century, 7th century BCE. Tripartite reincarnationism. Although in Greece they had other forms of reincarnationism as well. And I mean, I think you probably would have to consider, I think the scholars do consider the Abrahamic version a form of reincarnationism also, that you go on to another life. You know, the options are much reduced. You don't have an infinite variety of life forms you might become. You just go to one or other, or in between of the three options, I guess, if that's right, or the two main options. But it is actually a form of reincarnationism, technically speaking. But here you see the reason that it's considered a sort of penalty for the guy to have to become a fox for 500 lifetimes is that the tripartite reincarnationism, one of its three features is that the there's a kind of hierarchy of beings that you can become, that you can be. And, humans are actually, they're not at the top, so to speak. There are higher ones. There are sort of semi-divines and divines. But among all the birds and beasts and creepy crawlies, there's a hierarchy. And so he's sort of kicked back, back to foxhood. It's got to be there 500 just for this little answer. Doesn't seem that terrible, but I suppose if you're in the position of responsibility, like he is, maybe it's a grave thing to answer wrongly. But why is it wrong? It seemed like, isn't this what it's all about? Okay, so then after he's had his 500th life, presumably it's life number 500 as fox. I don't know. I mean, why he's a fox and yet he looks like a guy, don't ask. We don't know. And in fact, when he becomes deeply enlightened in the longer version, he says to Hyakujo, "Thank you so much. You've released me from the body of a fox. And I'm going to ask you a favor. Could you go round to the big rock on the other side of the mountain? And if you poke around in the bushes there, you'll find a dead fox. Could you perform the cremation rites for it as you would for a dead monk?" And sure enough, later on, they go and do that, and that happens. But I said, I mean, how come he's there as an old man, but at the same time he's a fox? I don't know. That's folkloric. Maybe foxes could show up as people from time to time. In Ireland, hares could show up as people from time to time. In some Native American contexts, bears can show up as people, and so on. And even sort of can't even mermaids show up as people from time to time? I don't know. I can't remember all the permutations of folkloric metamorphosis. Anyway, there he is, an old man, also a fox, and he's asking Hyakujo, "Help me. Really, not just let me not be a fox anymore, but actually let me be deeply awakened. Please. I did this wrong thing and I'm trying to put it right. Help me." And Hyakujo just says, the law of cause and effect cannot be obscured. It's kind of it's sort of classic Zen, really, that he doesn't simply say, "No, you are not free of cause and effect." He doesn't say that. He says, cause and effect can't be obscured. It's a marvelous answer. Here's why I feel it that way. He's saying, dare I go into those claims again? Claim 1, claim 2, claim 3. I'm going to try to avoid going there. But so just hear me out. Okay, he says the law of cause and effect can't be obscured. Okay, so we have some sense that this great enlightenment thing is about seeing through everything. Whether we claim that we're seeing through everything in terms of ontology, how things actually really are, or whether we're claiming that we're seeing through them on the level of how they arise to us in our experience, in our consciousness, or whether we're saying having this kind of experience where they all disappear is just profoundly beneficial and frees you from many layers of conditioning, or many ways that you're normally caught by habits and programming and needing to take care of numero uno and worried about all kinds of things. All of that can be gone through this experience. Whether with whichever of those we're saying, isn't it wonderful that Hyakujo says the law of cause and effect can't be obscured? Why is that so wonderful? Let me try to really get to it. It's because whichever of those it is, what does that 0 point do? Is it just 0? No, it's doing all this. This experience now that each of us is having is exactly that 0 point freely giving, being, creating, generating, giving birth, making, allowing all this to happen. And nothing can stop it. Nothing can stop it. Now, I don't know whether you can taste the relief and the wonder in that things take their course. Nothing can stop it. Now, don't take this as some fatalistic, why bother with anything kind of thing, not at all. Or as some sort of a, it's kismet, Horatio. Whatever was that story with Nelson? Kismet. Kiss me, Hardy. But it actually was saying Kismet Hardy. Hardy was his first mate or whatever. This is Admiral Nelson I'm talking about, the famous seaman, who died at the Battle of Trafalgar. And when he died, he said, he said, he's supposed to have said, they thought he said, kiss me, Hardy. But actually, he thought it said, kismet, Hardy, fate. I think it's the Arabic word for fate. So what, fate that I be dying now, basically, So now, this doesn't mean we don't try to make things better. It doesn't mean we live recklessly, heedlessly, because it's all fated anyway. Quite the reverse. Actually, our actions, behaviors, thoughts, even speech especially, bear fruit. That's part of the law of cause and effect. Practice, if followed diligently, tends to increase well-being and reduce suffering even without this sort of cataclysmic great enlightenment type thing, long before anything like that, it can be very helpful in decreasing our harmful ways. And I speak as somebody who's working on that, but I think I can truthfully say it has got, it has worked to some small degree already. And I'm sure there's a long, long way to go. But well, there is. I don't have to be sure of it. But you see the point that we don't want cessation, and that's the end of it. We don't want all is nothing, all is empty, and that's the end of it. Not at all. Not at all. I mean, it's fantastic, can be fantastically liberating. Yes, to go through that. And then really every moment's new. But every moment's new, arising. It's all arising now. And yes, I mean, how beautiful and wonderful. Another last point. There's actually several points that could be made, but let me just say, of course, to have glimpsed that other side, which is no side, to have glimpsed it, to have discovered there's this utter, I mean, it's beyond peace. Peace is not a strong enough word, but yes, peace, silence, stillness, utter, all-pervasive ease just behind everything and in everything and as everything. To have tasted that, if it's just enough, you can feel it, you can know it, you can sense it, you can see it, you can hear it thereafter. Will you all the time? Well, not if you're anything like me. You'll forget, but you can come back to it. You can practice and fortify the awareness of it, or open up the channel wider. You can keep doing that, and it can get clearer and clearer. And then it's like there's this amazing sense of love that comes from the sort of balance of somehow being aware of that emptiness and or this appearance, and knowing that this appearance is empty just makes it all the more cherishable, treasurable. And how amazing that it's all this is arising, how amazing that we're given all this experience. And to be less attached makes it more wonderful, and not less. There's this some misunderstanding of the word detachment in Buddhism that non-practitioners often have, like, doesn't that mean you don't care about anything? Not at all. It's quite the opposite. So the law of causation cannot be obscured. Oh, how wonderful. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. I haven't touched on half the things I wanted to. I'm going to have to give a whole session on a whole retreat on this koan sometime. Let me just say on this Zen basics, it's not basics, meaning not like we're going to lay it out straight. Okay, take it that way. You're gonna all the most important things about this practice handed to you on a plate. That's the retreat coming up next week. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, did anybody want to ask a question? You could raise a hand. We might have one or two. You could chat it. Nobody wants to sort of expose all my errors and ask me something difficult and make me stumble and say something stupid. Well, I've just been saying something very stupid for the last half hour, so you've already got that. But if anybody wants to ask anything, this is the time. Maybe everybody just had a nice nap while this bizarre nonsense was spewing from my mouth. Well, I hope it was good in some way. I hope you had hope you got sort of something out of it. Um, I'd like to actually, I'd actually would like to speak to it again on a sort of less profound level, because some of you who may have joined recently think, what the hell is this all about? And it's one of the hazards of enlightenment talk, is that if you haven't tasted it, it just sounds like abstract nonsense. And I've got to try to convince those of you who think it is. It's not. It's not abstract. This is, we're talking about real experience that you can have. And some of you I know have had glimpses and hunches and glancing blows and intimations. So you know that there's something there. You know that this isn't just made up. It's not made up. It's not abstract. It's not concepts. It's absolutely real. And this is why this crazy practice of Zen still exists, because it's addressing something real, very important, very astonishing about our human nature. Okay. And so, okay, wait, there's a chat. Let's see. No, okay, Kismet. Okay. Okay. I guess there's no questions. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a lovely rest of the evening, wherever you are, or morning.